Am I getting reverb? Is that me? No, it
Nope.
wasn't me.
No, I think we're
So
good.
anyway, good weekend. UConn's in the playoffs tonight. So being from Connecticut, I got to watch that. So that was a good game. So Michigan might pound the hell out of us, but hopefully not. But
Yeah. Michigan
hey,
hasn't had too many close games, and if they do, it could be trouble for them. So
there's been some good highlights reels this year. So I've enjoyed the highlight reels. I didn't watch all the games, but anyway. Hey, this came up Friday and kind of got me thinking. We always talk about, not always, but we talk about scope of work creep or scope creep, basically doing more than you should per the scope of work being there. And conversation came up and really started really thinking about it. But these aha moments, again, I knew it, but you don't really put it in two buckets. But someone made a reference that I love, that scope creep or scope of work creep can cut in two directions. And those two directions are your client, because your frontline employees or frontline team members do not have a clear scope of work or have a scope of work at all. Your clients are coming to your frontline workers and saying, hey, could you do this? I noticed this was kind of dirty. Or, hey, could you do that? And without the frontline workers really thinking about it, they're just doing it because they're trying to take care of the client. So they're trying to do the right thing. But that first cut is the client's asking for something. And maybe it's part of scope of work. Maybe it's not. Maybe you don't have a scope of work defined. So that first cut is that one. The second one, though, that kind of again, it's been there. I've known of it, but I really didn't segment it, was sometimes you have overzealous cleaners that are just, hyper, whatever it is. They're just hyper into what they do and they love what they do. And you love those, but they're preventing you, or they're slowing themselves down. They're slowing the overall production. They're decreasing the profitability of the account because they're going above and beyond the call of duty on the service. Someone says, hey, you vacuum this 3 times a week and they're doing it 5. So all of a sudden they're thinking they're doing the right thing, but you're slowing the production rate down. More importantly, you're preventing, in some cases, if they're going above and beyond some totally different things, you're preventing those cross-sell, upsell cleaning opportunities. So give me some perspective from a former BSC, kind of how you manage that, because it does start with the scope of work, right?
yeah, and I mean, so in our business, and even more so today, I'm encouraging people, when you get a scope of work, that is a template for multiple things. The first thing is the scope of work on what employees should be doing, how often, how frequent those activities should be happening. And the second is that's a form for take that, translate it to an inspection form for, daily, weekly, monthly, whatever you do. And so you want to stay as in line with that scope of work as possible and to fulfill your customer needs without, as we say, creeping. Because if you do, we start talking about points, right? Percentage points. We say points, and points really add up to dollars. And so my biggest concern was always, I never got mad at anybody for creeping when it benefited the customer, but because it was always good customer service to do small things, but more like one-time things.
Yeah.
But if it began like say, let's just say we're at a building and the owner of the building comes in, the cleaners are there and like, hey, we have that, that conference room upstairs, got the high glass on it. You guys get the first pane, but the second pane, is it a chance you guys can hit that? I don't have any problem for the employee touching base with the supervisor. They get a ladder, get up there and clean those one time. I'm not going to beat that. But if it becomes expected on a weekly basis where it was never put in the scope of work, that's when it starts costing you real money. And so those are the kinds of things that we would look for. But don't let creep dictate good customer service. That's always a fine line there. Yeah. And so that would be my first thought. But the second is if you don't visit your sites, you don't on a regular basis, let's take a building you might clean 1 or 2 days a week or 3 days a week, and it's the furthest building out, and you got a great employee that never call out a customer, never complains. You're making 20%, so it fits all your parameters. But you go out there, decide and visit, and they're spending 2.5 hours on a budgeted for an hour and a half or 2 hours, whatever it is. you're giving them money that's not being paid to your company, but you're giving it to the employee. No wonder they're happy. They're doing almost double the work every night
Yeah.
of what is expected. Now, is that terrible? No, but you're meeting your parameters and all that. But, we're still in business to make money and to do really good work. But you have to monitor all that stuff and make sure that, because it's very easy. Our company is very easy. I push customer service. Be good, be good, be good. Be good to people, be good to your employees, be good to your customer. And so in our company, we might have more creep on that side of it than we did. But in general, you have to watch, because the size of our company, if everybody did 30 minutes over because they were helping, next thing you know, 30 minutes times 300 employees, $150, 150 hours a night times hourly rates. Next thing you know, you're looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. So that's the key you got to watch for. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's that fine balancing act. But also, think about the reverse side. If you ask a team member to do an extra hour worth of work and not pay them, they would get very defensive, right? They would say, "No way, I'm not doing that." So I think it's that. I think what came across was that conversation I was having was just that maybe sometimes that lack of communication, that lack of the supervisors seeing that things, the frontline workers are doing those activities, but no one's aware of it.
Yeah.
And I think that's where it starts to get out of hand. Not having a scope of work, which seems very mundane, but not mundane. What I'm looking for? At least like standard, protocol. Missing scope of work is. I talk to contractors every week, and they don't have a scope of work. I think we do this. I think we do that. Having that standard laid down, and again, I think that prevents a lot of.
Yeah, worst case, have it in the closet.
Yeah.
Or on the phone or something. You got to have it. They got to know what they're doing.
I'm even talking about the client I had last week. We were talking, they didn't have it in a contract. It was just, you will clean the facility. And at that point, in my mind, that's just a recipe for disaster, because the client thinks this, you think this, there's going to be this gap between the two of you, right?
Top dollar if that's how you're doing it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the other thing too is at some point when they come back, the client comes back to you and says, "Hey, we need to put this out to bid. It's been 3 years. We just need to see what's going on." Is all that extra work is not in the scope of work, but you're pricing it based on your history of what you've done, and you're going, "Wow,
it's not apples to apples."
Yeah, it's not apples to apples. So I just thought it was an interesting conversation. And again, I thought about it, but I never really segmented that the scope of work creep can occur on two, customer side and your own employee side. So
yeah. That's a great point that you make, though, Jack, because that jobs that we pick up, that the customer gets so used to how we service them, then all of a sudden, Mr. Bigwig gets changed out to another Mr. Bigwig. He wants to do everything extremely by the book of, okay, I want contracts for everything. I'm going to do my best to come in and make sure our bottom line is effective and good and right where it needs to be. So I'm going to offer, renew contracts and get proposals from 3 or 4 different companies. And next thing you know, you're the incumbent, but you're doing twice as much as what the scope of work is. And you're going to price it based off of that, and everybody else can be down here. So you're going to be the highest.
Yeah.
And so that's an excellent point, especially if you have long-term relationships.
And that was the other layer. There's one other layer. So to add to this, it was a good conversation. It was a 30, 40-minute conversation. Again, we're trying to help them on some few other things, and this came up. But the other conversation was, I think there's a lot of assumptions. And what brought this, a lot of assumptions that the scope of work for this account is the same as this account, is the same as this account, the same as this account. And based on the salesperson, how they're selling that account, it could range, even though a dentist office should be the same as a dentist office, a class A should be same as a class A. There's going to be nuances that may add 15, 20 minutes to a dentist office, for example. There could be hours on a weekly basis added to a class A here versus class A there. So I think the other layer that's stacked on top of this is, just because I'm a cleaner frontline worker here, and I, let's just say I fill in for, another person in another building, is that scope of work of the building I'm coming from to the building I'm going to is not always the same, and many times it's not the same. So
Right.
that came up.
That's
So,
fascinating. Yeah. You really ought to pay attention to it. You got to pay attention to it and I think where even with subs, when you have a sub, you need to have a clear communication of what that scope of work is, because you're really just handing that over to them and saying, okay, have at it. Make sure the building gets cleaned 3 times a week, and here's what they're looking for. And so you really have to monitor that well. I wasn't heavy in the sub world. We had a few, but we just got to a place where the inspections and the relationship and the communication that was built between supervisor and employee really helped prevent some of that creep as well. So
yeah. And again, I think if you'll never keep creep 100% out. You'll probably be hopefully, like you said earlier, I think it's good practice to be on the side of the client because you want them to be happy. But if you are over creeping, you're reviewing that you're ruining or limiting those upsell, cross sell opportunities. And I think that's, as we talk about, that is a good profitable side of the business that everybody should be, capturing, maximizing, optimizing. So I know it was an interesting conversation. I just thought I'd bring it up because it's going to be that SOPs keep coming up. We're doing some things with SOPs. So I don't know.
Well, and the other thing too is the one thing that always comes back to my mind is I used to remember when people bring to me, I would look at the whole picture. Say it's a customer, a single standing building, and we knew we had to renew the contract, and we had some scope of work creep going on, we would fix it then, right? Then you go over here, and I might have a big customer I might have multiple buildings. Like one of the customers we had, like 1.5 million square feet. We have multiple buildings, but one of the buildings was this small little teeny outlier that was only done once a week because we didn't want somebody else getting in, right? And so we gave that little building the same customer service that we gave all the buildings because it was standardized for that particular customer. Something we probably wouldn't do if that was just a freestanding building. So don't let that single little building dictate creep for the other big buildings. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's okay. It's not going to kill you to, your goal is per customer in that bigger picture. You still want to meet your percentage goals. That's the key. So, because I've seen guys pitch a fit over, well, they want me to do this, and I'd rather give up the whole contract. I'm like, would you? Would you really? So, I mean, that's a good sized contract to throw that kind of language around too. Some things you're better off just saying, yeah, I'll take care of it.
Yeah.
That's how integral this building is. This building service industry is.
Yeah, we this came up on another call too. This kind of ties to it, but as those creeps occur, that creep occurs, and you're okay with that creep. Still try to classify that. I was talking to some people. They were like, how do I? Because clients don't remember what you did for them yesterday, much less 6 months, much less a year from now, right? And somebody taught me a few years ago, and I've never seen anybody really truly implement it, but I think it's a brilliant idea. But they call it the VAP award, like the VAP program. So value added program is what they called it. So anytime you did something that was, you had your frontline workers, anytime they did something, or your supervisors would be the monitor of it. Every time they did something above and beyond the scope of work, so something that was creep, but it was acceptable, that window you mentioned, cleaned it at one time, is you would go into, the supervisor would go in and actually call it in and say, hey, could you add a VAP to this account here? And says, oh, clean that window. It would be classified under 1 of 6 settings, additional services or whatever it may be. But they would put it into their billing software so that when the client did come back to him and say, hey, what did you do for me on my last quarterly visit? Well, guess what? We unlocked the doors 15 times. We did high window cleaning 2 times. We did XYZ. It's not part of the scope of work. And oh, by the way, we applied a dollar amount to it. So those additional services we did over the last quarter valued out to about $2,500. So just FYI, I thought that was a pretty brilliant idea because you try to think about how do you collect that. You can put it into a CRM, but quite honestly, you should be putting your accounting software and say, hey, it's additional service, but it's $0 value. You don't invoice them for it, but you can pull that data out of the invoicing system to say, hey, this is the value of that if we were to charge you for that.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. That's a great idea. That's a really good way to navigate that. So for sure.
so anyway, geeked out on creeping. I was creeping on creeping last Friday, I guess is the best way to say it. So
That is not the best way to say it.
creeping on creeping. But other than that, can't think of anything else. I think anything on my mind. Anything else on your mind for last week you learned so we can share knowledge-wise?
No, well, I think I'm always learning. I think one of the things that, you know, I've had some good feedback about our conversation last week a little bit on, we had a couple topics, but one of the things that has really started coming into play is um, on the customer care side and how customer care and culture fit. I've written another article. It's getting ready to come out, but it's on how does company culture impact customer care, customer service, and this scope of work creep kind of plays into a little bit. One of the points I made on it was the fact that as we navigate the day-to-day company culture, what does that begin to look like? I'm just going to look it up here and see if I can pull it up real quick. But anyway, what does that look like on a day-to-day business, on your day-to-day business, and how does that impact the end user from your organization? Anyway, one of the points we talked about was um, having operational strength, and so the customer can see that they're dealing with someone that has policies and procedures in place, and they do have a system to run their organization so that things like you just said, I mean, a great example of it. Here's some things that we've done, and we want to quantify those and show them to you, but we really just want to make sure that as we are building our company, those systems are in place, and how that those systems are driven by the culture of the people that work for you, that are in your leadership, that are in your office, and how that permeates throughout the whole organization. And then making sure that the communication pieces are all the same, like for even for my coaching business, but also for my business was, let's make sure what are the talking points that are going to be consistent and that everybody's going to use so that the customer hears that all the time, instead of, hey, we want to get this point made. Well, then it gets lost in translation. Each employee is going to translate it and say it differently. But, we started telling people, here are the lines we want you to use. Here's the verbiage that we want you to use. And that becomes part of getting a good communication culture.
Yeah.
And which translates into a little bit what we've been talking about today is, when you have a great communication relationship with your customer, um, scope creep can be addressed easily, versus what do you mean you did this, or you're doing more than this, or you're going to charge me for that, right? So it's really, it is a system that you've got to get going. And Jack, you and I deal with this all the time. We have people under $500,000 or under $1 million, and like, that's wonderful, but how does that happen? You start with the things you can control early on. So if it's just you and another person, start there, just start there. And as you grow, as you build and you have growing pains, those things become repeatable, and you'll learn, oh yeah, that is easier. It makes things a lot easier. So
No, love it, love it, love it. I was actually tying to the coaching. I had somebody reach out today. I've got an email copy to you on it, but she's interested in coaching, and she was kind of not sure which direction to go because she's got, of all things, she had some large bank group offering consulting services for a cleaning business. I'm going, how does that actually work? So that was kind of interesting.
Oh,
They
a
put a
bank.
price tag on it. They put a price tag on it of $80,000, and I thought, wow, that's a steal. They go, yeah, they're giving us pricing. They're giving us pricing what it would cost them, but they're doing it as a kind of a I don't know what they're doing. I think they're trying to help smaller businesses escalate.
Yeah.
So I was kind of just interested in the whole model there, and I asked her, have they helped any other cleaning businesses? And she's going to check in on that. So I go definitely check references. But one thing she did say is she talked to several others or mentioned several other people. But there's still a lot of fluff out there with coaching and consulting out there, and I hate to see it because people are throwing some big dollars out there to give you coaching, and it's basically taking some money from you, and you're not getting the results. And I did commit to her that our 90-day program, we're talking about doing this. I go, we'll do 2 sessions. If you don't see value, we'll give your money back. So
Yeah.
I don't think many people out there offer money back.
Yeah. If you're looking for a coach, here's the best thing I can tell you. And this is when I decided to go in coaching, this is how I decided to do it. Okay. I didn't think I had anything to offer people. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm like, I'm a janitor that ended up building a company and running it, but I still saw myself that way. And I met with probably one of the top coach consultants in the country, guys. He's worked with Chick-fil-A, Delta, numerous professional ball teams and organizations. And he finally, in our conversation, he goes, "Hey, let me ask you, how many years of experience you have in this industry?" I said, "Well, I've been in it about 22 years, 30 total as in it, but 20 to 22 years as an owner." He goes, "That's all you need." He goes, "People will pay you for what you know and how much you failed to not do it again."
They'll pay you for the things you failed on, so they don't have to fail on.
Right.
That's the catch. That's the catch.
Right. And so I would encourage anybody, if you're out there and you're considering a coach, get somebody that's been in the industry and they know what they're doing. Because
I thought you were about to say get somebody who screwed up a lot in their 30 years of career. But
okay, I'll take that. Hey, listen, there's a degree on the wall, and I did it backwards. That's a degree from 2022. I did all the screwed up stuff in business. Then I thought I'm not going to be the only one in this house without a degree. And so yeah, absolutely. I'll put it that way. Maybe I should make my business card that, right? Like, I've screwed up enough. Don't do it. Call me.
Here's my mantra. I've stepped in it, so you don't have to. That's my tagline there.
Exactly. So. And Jack, I tell people all the time, I'm horrible with this. I don't know if you are, but just text me. Just I really want to help you. I want to get paid because I need to make a living. But if you can't afford it, just text. And I got people right now that text me. And I'm thinking I should be charging them. I should be charging them. But I can't help wanting to see people not make mistakes. And I just don't want people to do that. And I want to protect the industry from the craziness, people that get in for a year and a half, 2 years. And then we've also, I'm going to get on my soapbox for just a second, but we also have, right? We also have capital investment groups coming in like crazy. I get calls 2 or 3 a week. Do you know anybody that wants to sell? And be careful with that because most of those guys, they don't have a clue how to run this business. But they're trying to buy it up, but they want to keep people in place that do know how. But I don't know. Yeah, I don't want to be negative towards those guys because they're good guys. A lot of them are doing good things, but I will tell you that you got to find somebody. If you're going to hire a coach, you got to find somebody that knows the business and has done it and didn't have all this gray hair until I did it. Then it all started popping out, and for every whisker of gray is probably a mistake in the business that I learned to not do again. So
no, I agree. No, I think again, the investment bankers, they have different priorities than you when you were running your company. You were looking at this from a family type organization, building something that would help others. And again, financial, I guess the capital folks, they look at things differently. It's business. It's a business versus a business and a family. It's different. And I'm not saying everybody's like that, but that's the reality of it. And again, I think we're going to talk through. We're working on a program right now with. I think they're going to go into Ricky's podcast. A guy from Cleaning Exits. He's going to be on the podcast here in a couple of weeks, which should be a pretty good episode. He's going to kind of set the stage to see if there's enough companies out there that are potentially thinking about selling, or even if they're not thinking about selling today, getting things in place for 15 years, 10 years, 5 years out, so that if and when that day does come, they're kind of properly positioned versus, all of a sudden now I want to sell and I've got to wait 5 more years because I didn't set the the foundation correctly. So that's coming through. But I think that's going to be an eye opener because, he goes through a lot of different angles of how people look at this. And a lot of owners that we hear about through, conversations with him struggle with that letting go. And it's not just letting go of the company, but it's also letting go of the trust that you've built as an owner of a company. You don't want to see your employees or your team members kind of, all of a sudden be left high and dry if you go out to private equity and all this stuff. So it should be an interesting podcast. And that'll be, I think they're shooting on the 15th. So it'll probably be available sometime around May timeframe with that. So
yeah,
good. Yeah. So anyway, all right.
Sorry, I didn't mean to drag us over. So
no, we're good. So appreciate it. See you Friday and have a good week, man.
All right. Have a good week, everybody.
Cool.